This is ICE literally arresting a child and putting the child in handcuffs. You don't handcuff a child. What is wrong with these people? There is a degree of moral depravity that we have reached as a country that is just wild. I don't know what to do with this. She's by no stretch of the imagination the only child caught up in this, in what ICE is doing. You know, here's the thing. Mass deportation to a degree that's happening right now under the Trump administration necessarily leads to really vile, like ugly, disgusting, horrific situations. You're taking children's parents away and they have nobody to live with anymore. For example, that's in some cases. That's in a lot of cases. And on occasion, you get things like this right here. Now, when you do deportations or renditions, is what I think we should be calling them. When you're doing renditioning like this, sending them to a concentration camp or wherever it is you're sending them, you know, the government needs to have a degree of empathy when dealing with this and go case by case to see, like, is it really worth what we're doing here? Can we put this person on a path to citizenship instead because they have like a child here and they have a life and they're a taxpayer and they're, you know, contributing to society and everything. They're not dangerous. They're good people. Can we put them on a path to citizenship? They're helping our economy a lot. You're supposed to have those types of thoughts or those analyses when you're, you know, doing this renditioning in government. But here we are on the other side, and Donald Trump he doesn't. There's no deeper thought. There's no respect. There's no thinking about, you know, what the ramifications are. There's just literally arresting children. This kid had to go to an immigration trial alone. He's like 4.
Are you a little nervous this morning? See? Do you understand what these proceedings here in court are all about?
He shook his head no for the audio audience. No, he has no idea what's going on. It's just a little, maybe 4-year-old boy sitting here alone. No one else around him.
You know what a lawyer is?
No. No, he doesn't. He doesn't know what a lawyer is. He doesn't know what any of this is. There's nobody sitting in the chair next to him. What the f***? Now, I don't really blame the judge here. You know, this case was put before him. He doesn't really have a whole lot of say in that. But why are we doing this? Like, why are we sending children through the legal system, through courthouses like this? This is insane. The degree of moral depravity is at an all-time low. It is at an all-time low to put a kid in handcuffs like this. What the f***? Like I said, it's a necessary component to mass renditions like we're seeing right now. And Trump doesn't give a shit about any of that. You know, people were upset about kids in cages. Look at what we're seeing now. You know, Trump supporters were disturbed by kids in cages. What about now? The degree of moral depravity has no bottom. Okay, that was just a couple of kids. There's more. This is Stephen Miller, literal Nazi. One of Trump's top people. I don't even remember what he is or what he does.
More that were allowed to either fly into the country or overstay their visas. It is a clear and present danger to the national security of this country. And we have federal judges telling President Trump that he can't deport these threats from our communities.
That's not what anybody was saying. Okay, I'm not sure which specific case he's talking about, but they need due process. They need to go through the court system. That's probably the one he's talking about. They need to be able to, they need it adjudicated. Are they actually members of a gang? Are they contributing members to society? Are they citizens? Maybe they are. You don't know because you didn't send them through a court system. You have no clue. There have been at least a couple of cases where ICE went to pick somebody up and they were with their cousin in their car. The cousin's driving and ICE grabs the cousin too because he has dark skin. And they put him into the system. Doesn't matter if he's a U.S. citizen. It's irrelevant. They just throw him in the system and send him to El Salvador. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what they're doing now. I'm not sure what they're doing. But Trump is definitely telling Bukele to build more concentration camps in El Salvador. This kid right here, U.S. citizen, full, like, naturalized, as in he was born in America, U.S. citizen, taken by ICE and kept for 10 days. Nobody knew where he was or what was going on or anything at all, and they refused to release him. 10 days. Wrong place, wrong time, and they didn't give him a court hearing. Just threw him in there. No due process. And they had no way of even figuring out if he was a U.S. citizen because they don't give him due process. That is what Stephen Miller is calling for, not just for, you know, people suspected of gang activity, but for children. For children. People aren't getting due process. So he, as the Nazi that he is, he's going to twist this around where people should be getting court hearings to determine who they are and if they have any association with anything. And he's going to twist it around to be about him and Trump and how they're being hurt or something.
Judges telling President Trump that he can't deport these threats from our communities? This is the choice facing every American. Either we all side and get behind President Trump to remove these terrorists from our communities.
They're not terrorists. They're just people. And even if they were terrorists, you have no way of knowing that because you refuse to send them through a court system.
Or we let a rogue, radical left judiciary shut down the machinery of our national security apparatus. President Trump is going to see this through to his conclusion, and we will find and remove every terrorist from this country, and President Trump will make this nation safer than ever before, and he'll do it over the fighting and opposition of the Democrat Party, over the fighting and opposition of the communist left-wing judges, over the fighting and opposition of the far-left federal bureaucracy. He will not be deterred, Sean. He will see this through, I promise you.
Again, this is like identical to what happened in Germany, if anybody cares, talking about communist judges, communist threats. Hitler talked about communists nonstop. If you didn't support what he was doing to the immigrants of the time, the Jews, who were quote unquote the aliens in the region, if you didn't support him doing that, you were a communist. Again, I have to clarify, the Jews were not actually immigrants. They lived there for hundreds of years, but Hitler called them immigrants. Like, this whole thing was about this regime's moral depravity. I just want to, like, drive home how absolutely deeply morally depraved we have become, or how depraved the U.S. government has become. You know, say you go to an ice cream shop and you buy an ice cream cone and the guy makes it, and as he's walking over to you to hand it to you, he trips and falls and the ice cream falls on the floor. Our moral system in the United States dictates that he has a responsibility to replace that ice cream, even though he already took the ice cream out. So the company is out the ice cream now, and your money is already in their register. So you are out the money. The transaction has taken place, but our moral system dictates that he must make us whole, right? That's not the case everywhere. Like in some countries that happens, you just don't get your ice cream anymore. Or like we have a moral system where if something doesn't work, if it's broken out of the box, you return it and you get your money back. That's not the case everywhere. We are living in a moral system now that is changing rapidly into something that the majority of the United States people don't recognize anymore or will not recognize. You know, the Trump administration, the regime, is eroding moral norms. They're eroding things that we would expect. Those examples I gave, those are innocuous. Those are just like, whatever, who cares about that? But to arrest children and send them through a court system with like no parent, no nothing, that is a moral low that we would not have accepted 4 years ago, or even maybe a year ago. I'm just trying to point out like how morally depraved the U.S. has become, the government in the U.S., and that we need to keep our heads on to make sure that we don't spiral down the same moral drain. This is something else that wouldn't have been acceptable just last year. Stu Peters. I hope he doesn't say a slur in this. He does that a lot.
This country doesn't have a racism problem. We don't have a gun problem. We don't have a poverty problem that's causing mass violence. What we have here is a black problem. We have a problem with black crime. This is a group of people that comprise.
You notice how he emphasized people that way? A group of people. I'm super concerned he's going to say a slur. I guess I'll cut it later if I need to. This would have been unacceptable just last year, just 1 year ago. The degree of moral decay happened quicker than I thought it would.
As 12 to 13% of the entire United States population, but commits more than half of all of its violent crime.
He's talking about a Nazi statistic that I'll talk about in a second.
You're more likely to be murdered by a black woman than you are by a white man. You're more likely to be murdered by a rich...
Most of this is not true, by the way, but again, Nazi statistics, we'll hit it in a second. Just keep listening.
...by a rich black person than by a poor white. They are overrepresented in every single criminal statistic you could possibly think of. It's unsustainable. Yet it shows no signs of stopping. And as the Carmelo Anthony saga and all of these other cases play out, you can rest assured, we're going to see more violence. We're going to see more viral news stories. We're going to see more black victimhood. We're going to see more attacks on whites. And that's not fear-mongering. That's just the truth. It's time that we have a national conversation about the problem that we have with blacks.
So, yeah, that's Stu Peters. He is a full-blown Nazi, like I said. These statistics that he's citing are false in most cases, cherry-picked at best. But the one that I wanted to zero in on is 1350. That's the most popular argument, 1350. 13% of the population, the black community, commits 50% of the violent crimes. First of all, that is cherry-picked. Why would you pick a very specific subset of crime? Anyway, here's the bottom line. The black community is overrepresented in certain crimes per capita. But why is that? It's one of two reasons. It can only be one of two. Either it's because there's an underlying social problem. If that's the case, it can be fixed. You know, we can put money into building up black communities. We can try to equal things out more. We can pump money into like education and stuff, you know, build up their schools in areas that are predominantly black and things like that. Either it's social and it can be fixed, or it's genetic. And if you believe it's genetic, then you're a Nazi. Plain and simple. That was Hitler's belief. He believed people were genetically inferior. You are a eugenicist if you believe that incorrectly. The answer is, of course, there is an overrepresentation because of societal issues, and it can and should be fixed. We should be working on building up the communities to make things better, to make people's lives better, to make sure that police officers are not singling black kids out. You know, that's why gangs formed in the first place in the United States originally, whenever it was. They formed as a protection, a means of protection for people in black communities. They would follow each other around after work to make sure that they got home safe and they weren't beaten to by the police. Anyway, in 1923, I think, the guy named Thomas Hunt Morgan, he was a researcher for Columbia University, I believe, if I remember correctly. I wrote about this at length in my book, Was Hitler an Atheist, if you want to read about it. But Thomas Hunt Morgan, by the way, it's on Amazon and Audible, but Thomas Hunt Morgan is a researcher at Columbia Law. He studies fruit flies. And this fruit fly experiment is famous in young earth creationist circles because he used radiation in one of his studies to try to change the genes of a fruit fly and selectively breed it to so on and so forth. Basically, through all of his studies, he was assigned to be a eugenicist. He was assigned to study the benefits of eugenics and how it can be used positively. That when I say eugenics, I mean artificially guided selection for the best genes. The version of eugenics that we know today is the one that Hitler employed, which is not just selective breeding, but selectively killing people with supposed bad genes. Well, Thomas Hunt Morgan wasn't doing that. He was just selecting, or he was just trying to select for certain genes through breeding. And what he discovered is that it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Eugenics is a dead end. It was always a dead end. He quit his job at Columbia University because they insisted he continue to pursue the studies, and that's just not how it works, plain and simple. Well, Hitler saw how dogs were bred, and you could breed a temperament into a dog. You know, you could make them mean or nice or friendly or emotionally intelligent or, you know, intellectually intelligent or whatever. And he said, why don't we do that with humans? The problem with that is the genes in dogs that affect their personality are largely monogenic. Like there are multiple genes that control their personality, but way, way fewer than in humans. It's just a few it's just a few genes that you have to select for when you're breeding a dog to change your temperament. With human beings, there are thousands of genes that need to change our temperament or whatever. We've been selectively breeding dogs for 10,000 years, and there has been no selective breeding in human beings. Not artificially, not intentionally like that. So basically, you'd have to start from square one, and maybe in 10,000 years, if you kept up a selective breeding program of humans for the sake of eugenics, maybe then you could have something like that. But it just doesn't work that way. Evolution just doesn't work that way. You know, Hitler tried to cut off the bad genes. Like you have a bad heart or something, he kills you. You have you catch cholera or something, kills you. That's it. That's not how it works. How are you helping anything by doing that? We have cures. People can be cured of this shit. You know, the belief of the Nazis was you shouldn't need, for example, penicillin because you should be able to just overcome strep throat on your own, and that's it. And if you don't, then you're weak and you should just die. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of, like, belief system that Hitler adhered to, that the Nazis adhered to. And that is the belief system that Stu Peters, for example, also believes in. When he's espousing this stuff about black people being, committing half the crimes or whatever, he's saying they are genetically inferior, genetically bred to be violent. It's pseudoscience. It's nonsense. And it's literal Nazi. I'm running out of time, but there's one more clip that I want to talk about here because it relates heavily to the Nazis and how they operated. Listen to this woman right here.
I just had dinner with a friend that works for Catholic Charities of Dallas, Texas. Okay? Stick with me here. This is going to disturb all of you.
Catholic Charities are generally, for the most part, not super heavy conservative, but they can be.
They just got a letter from the tip top of the people in Washington telling them that they would not get money to help their charitable organization feed people.
I.e., I assume that she's saying they will lose their tax-exempt status or they won't get government grants to feed homeless, for example, or take care of children.
If they did not give up all of the names, addresses, and information of all of the El Salvadorian, I can't even do it. I can't even talk about it because it makes me want to cry. She said she is so torn, but it came down from up above that they have to give them up.
give up the names of the El Salvadorans, I guess give up the names of immigrants that they work with is what she's saying. That is exactly identical to what happened in Germany. Again, if anybody cares anymore, it's identical. You know, they tried to get lists of people early on, and a lot of people cooperated with that whole listing thing because they thought if they just put their name on a fucking list, then it'd be over. You know, fine, I'm on your list. Okay. For example, in Germany, they said anybody that has Jewish ancestry and has more than $5,000 in assets, you have to declare those assets. And they say, okay, fine, whatever, I'll declare it. They put their name on the list. Now, Germany has a big list of all of the Jewish people in the area and all of the money that they have. They tried to get lists of people by other means, any means that they possibly could, and then they started hunting them down. They were strong-arming, blackmailing, and otherwise trying to force charities to give up names as well in this exact same way. Again, identical. I know you don't want me to say that Trump is like a Nazi or whatever, but what do you expect me to say when this is happening? What do you expect from me? What am I supposed to call him?
They have to give up all of their information if they want the money to help everyone. How is this what we are living in? How is this what is happening?
Complete moral breakdown. We are witnessing full moral depravity unfold. And it is absolutely wild to see, and more important now than ever to keep our own moral grounding in check. Do not let yourself go down this path of absolute moral depravity. It's gonna be a challenge for some people to have everybody around you saying something that they wouldn't have said 5 years ago, and you not start and you holding on to the fact that it's absolutely disgusting and evil and wrong. It's gonna be hard when everyone around you is gaslighting you practically. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. Just wild, man.